Welcome to the Likeville podcast. This is John Faithful Hamer. Today we're going to be talking with Nassim Nicholas Taleb, the best-selling author of The Black Swan, Fooled by Randomness, Anti-Fragile, The Bed of Procrustes, and most recently, Skin in the Game, which for my money is his best so far. But before we get to our conversation with Nassim, I just want to talk a little bit about the podcast. We could very much use your support. There's a number of different ways you can support the podcast. You can become a Patreon supporter. You go to the Patreon site and look up Likeville. That's one way. And, don't feel as if you have to support with a lot. Even just a couple of dollars a month is very helpful to us. You can also help us by liking us on iTunes, by reviewing the podcast, and by sharing it with your friends and enemies if you want as well. Also, this episode is brought to you by our Patreon supporters and also by Elsa's, the bar on Roy Street. If you live in Montreal, you know what a fantastic bar Elsa's is. If you're going to be in Montreal for a visit or a conference or something like that, definitely check out Elsa's. It's on Roy Street in Plateau Montréal, and it's, in my opinion, the best bar in Montreal. In fact, we bought our place on Laval Avenue just around the corner from Elsa's. We bought in that location in part because it was close to Elsa's. It's that good. This episode is also brought to you by Seb Furtado Photography. Sebastian is a professional fine art photographer who is offering private online one-on-one classes for those who want to drastically improve their skills in photography. And so he will show you completely how to use the camera, all the mechanics of how to do it. He'll teach you about light, about all these things. He'll also show you how to edit your photographs after to get them to be, their absolute best. And he's a fantastic teacher. If you go online, you can find all sorts of testimonials attesting to that fact. Today's episode is also brought to you by Good Mix, which is a fantastic cereal. It's a mix of seeds. It's very paleo seeds and all sorts of fruits and things like that. You mix it with yogurt. It's absolutely delicious. And it has these wonderful effects on your digestion, which I'm not going to go into, but you can try it yourself. We'll have links to both Elsa's and to Good Mix on our website. You can also join our Facebook group. That's another way you can help us. We tend to put out notifications of future podcasts, future guests we're going to have through the Facebook page, which is Likeville. And also on that page, that's the best way if you want us to ask guests particular questions, which we've done that in the past with great success. People have said, can you make sure to ask Stephen Marsh this, or ask Jonathan Kay that, or whatever. So that's please do join that group if you haven't already. All right, so in today's podcast, we talk about a number of different things going off of Skin in the Game. I think the most interesting thing overall about the interview with Nassim is that he talks about insights that he's had into his own book, into Skin in the Game. That now that there's been some water under the bridge, he finished the book, he published it, he's given a lot of interviews talking about the book, he's had feedback from readers, and so he himself is sort of seeing things about the book that he wasn't entirely aware of right off the bat, right? And what the overall teachings are. He also sort of foreshadows a little bit at the end of the podcast. I'm not going to give it away, but he talks a little bit about what he's going to be doing in the future and what future plans he has. All right, well, without further ado, here is my discussion with Nassim Nicholas Taleb. Nassim.
How you doing, my friend?
Hey, I'm doing very, very well. I'm in a very good place, actually, doing very well.
Yeah,
So I'm so glad to finally talk to you about skin in the game.
yeah.
We,
Thanks. It's the
it's
right time because I've digested the idea, and now we can talk about it.
Yeah, it has unseated the bed of Procrustes as my favorite
Oh,
of your
thank you very
books.
much. Thanks a lot.
It's your best book yet. I mean, I don't know how you're gonna top this. Are you
I
gonna?
see. Okay, so the way to view the question is if it's part of the inserto, you cannot separate it from the inserto. Sort of
Yeah,
like people have, you say that's modernity. Modernity, go to the gym, you see people working on shoulders, whatever. It doesn't work that way. If you
yeah,
think of movement in general, when you lift weight, it doesn't matter. You don't think in nature you want to lift a log or something. You don't focus on a biceps or something else. Everything works together. Likewise, you cannot
yeah.
separate the inserto. I mean, parts of the inserto from one another. It's one block.
Hmm. No, I find this is where a lot of the ideas that you could see sort of in kind of embryo starting to develop in the Black Swan and Fooled by Randomness, and in some of the aphorisms in the Bed of Procrustes, and then they start to get much more developed in Anti-Fragile. In Skin in the Game, they're fully
Exactly. Yeah,
born,
it is. It's yeah.
completely.
It
It's
takes you a
yeah,
while to get to wrap things together, which is why it's enough of a reason for me to close the inserto by saying
yeah.
that skin of the game wraps
Okay,
everything up.
yeah. There's you mentioned one thing. I read it over last week again, the book, and one thing that you mentioned a couple of times is you say that the West is presently committing suicide. Can you? What do you
Uh,
mean by that?
yeah. Okay. So it is. Let's take a few aspects of life.
Okay.
Okay. Uh, One of them is what I call pseudo rational thinking, decision making based on old models. When you, for example, let's take something like immigration.
Okay.
Okay, you because of minority rule, it's not the proportion of people of a certain creed in your population that matters, is how active they are.
Mm-hmm.
I illustrated in a minority rule that you can have a minority of people who don't like peanuts, and peanuts will be, or who are allergic to peanuts, and peanuts will be banned from schools.
Yeah.
So, and the other, so that's the first mistake people make, because you have a bunch of bureaucrats who survived using reasoning rather than survived using survival.
Yeah.
You get the idea of having their instinct. And the second point is that they are so naive that, for example, they think that religions are one item, just like colors. This is blue, this is green, this is pink,
Yeah.
and where in fact you cannot compare them, because some religions are full-blown political systems that
Yeah.
don't separate they don't have a demarcation between the sacred and the profane.
Yeah.
Okay, and other religions have such a demarcation. So you cannot have. I mean, Christianity, for example, is not the same religion as the other two Semitic religions, because Christianity has a built-in fundamental separation of church and state.
Yeah.
You see, which persisted through difficult times, at least cosmetically, but it was built in, so it was prepared to separate the two. Whereas some other creeds, or within Christianity, some parts don't separate the profane from the sacred, and so you end up with political systems marketed as religion who take advantage of our tolerance. And it's asymmetric, because you need a symmetry. Skin in the game is about symmetry,
Yeah.
and you need a symmetry of tolerance on both sides. Otherwise, things cannot work.
Yeah. If it's not, or yeah,
So
if it's not reciprocated, it's not gonna work out. Yeah.
exact, exactly. So with and the West, because we've been managed more and more by a bunch of nerds who don't really have a good understanding or grasp of reality. Uh, you were in trouble. Now you may ask me, why weren't we in trouble in the past? And the answer is clear. You live in Canada,
Yeah.
okay, for some weird reason. Okay, So let's
We
let,
don't have
okay.
the same immigration. Our immigration laws are much stricter than you have in the United States. Much
I
stricter.
see. I see.
Yeah.
I see. So yes. So you live in Canada, and GDP in Canada, the GDP in most of the Western world that is attributed to government is between 5 and 10 times higher than it was a century ago.
Okay.
Okay, so think about it. You have more and more bureaucrats. 10 times in some places, say France, bureaucrats command 10 times more control of your life, and that's off of a higher GDP. So you're ending up with this is modernity, what is doing to us, and the modern times. You're ending up with more and more people who really are clueless. They're there because they want the satisfaction of a steady salary. So you have a bunch of rent seekers running your
Hey,
life.
this is the David
And
Graeber talks to that book you recommended to me, Bullshit Jobs. Yeah.
yes, David is a very insightful
Yeah.
fellow, but I reach often very dramatically opposite conclusion. But I like no, no, but I like people who think independently
Yeah.
and have intellectual courage. And David has both, although I disagree with him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he basically says that the number of bullshit jobs in government has grown just as fast as the number of bullshit jobs in big corporations. Right?
Yeah, but big corporations also have, the people. This is why big corporations commit suicide
Yeah.
eventually, and this I've shown in Anti-Fragile, and you see it again and again and again. And I remember, like 25 years ago, when I was trading bonds or trading stuff, how many AAA corporations there were, and today there aren't that many left.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
and the survival of a large corporation, the S&P 500, used to be something like 60 years
Yeah.
life expectancy, and today it's below 10, well, maybe around 10 years. So the so we have corporations are luckily like governments that go bust once in a while.
Yeah. Well, like Greece did,
The,
right? Greece went bust, right? So,
yeah,
yeah.
Greece went, but corporation, but the government. I mean, you want the government institution to reset. In other words, you fund something, 10 years later you stop and restart.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so if the justification is there, obviously you're going to do it again. Otherwise, you end up with metastatic bureaucracies, and this is what we have. People don't realize that one thing about bureaucrats. I don't know if David Graeber has mentioned it, which is as follows: take the EU. The EU came in on a platform of subsidiarity. In other words, the regions decide first, and what's left that can't be decided by the regions or by localities flows to the top, which is, the dream of a localist. And people like myself were very enthusiastic for such a
Yeah.
project. Then you realize that you have a bunch of bureaucrats in Brussels who have a boss, and you want to impress your boss. So what do? You find things to do, all right? That the easiest, the low hanging fruits.
Yeah.
So you start regulating what farm tractors need to have as windshield wipers, okay? And you have pages and pages of such regulations. But these idiots can't even guard their borders, okay? So you have to bribe Gaddafi. Yeah, so this is where, and okay, now let me finalize my idea on how the West is committing suicide. At no point in history have we had people take risks, killing others, harming others, bankrupting others, milking others without themselves being subjected to at least the same risk, if
Well,
not
sure.
higher.
Kings used to
Okay.
ride out at the front of the army. I mean, they.
Exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the idea of a law. That's what it's still. And there's one thing actually that's very interesting that I discovered that is proper to and now proper to Islam, okay, which is that in Islam you need to be a risk taker to have any position, especially okay in a commercial domain.
Yeah.
And that's what Christianity missed out on in medieval times by still respecting risk taking, military risk taking, or the physical risk taking, but not commercial risk taking, which was frowned upon. You
Yeah.
see, and this is why when you look at the commercial rules of antiquity and behavioral antiquity, it's actually very preserved in Sharia law,
Yeah.
which is something very interesting because it makes so much sense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Neil Ferguson points out, I think it's in The Square in the Tower, that actually the Florentine traders eventually got around that in the Renaissance period. Like they found creative ways to get in on that action.
No,
But
okay.
yeah,
Everyone. I mean, the job of every person in such a position is to beat the system.
yeah,
Every profession wants to sort of like, as we say, take advantage of the lady. So this is why you have professions. So, for example, builders would never reveal their tricks up till recently, and doctors, of course, were there to protect their guilds rather than protect the public.
yeah,
So you've always had a tension and skin in the game between people, but effectively in an open system, just as the one we have in the United States, there's a constant pressure for survival that clear things up. Let me mention one thing that I'm glad I'm talking to you now because you always have to leave the best, to the end.
yeah.
I mean, to the not earlier in the cycle because I've had the chance to discuss aspects of my book, and I think I now figured out what the central one is.
Can I just pause for a second? I gotta say, I love that because I think it's so people don't, when you're writing, you don't always know why you're writing. So you figure out what you wrote after you write it, right? Like you're digesting the thought with the audience, right?
Exactly. Yeah. No, but it's exactly no. It's a green lumber fallacy. You have you know that it's important, but you don't know why. And after a while, you figure out why. So the green lumber fallacy is the one I discuss in Anti-Fragile, and I reintroduced it in Skin in the Game.
Can you just briefly say what that is? Because it's such a hilarious idea. It's amazing.
Exactly. It's a story of a fellow who wanted to become, to trade green lumber, okay, and specialize in lumber, and he knew everything about lumber. He knew the supply, the demand. He made regressions. He studied the technical aspects. He knew absolutely everything you may want to know about the subject that you could, figure out from public domain information. He knew everything.
Yeah.
And of course, the name of the book is what I learned losing $1 million because he went bust. Now there was that fellow who was a pit trader in the same pit when I was a pit trader, interestingly, and actually I know the fellow who was making tons of money trading green lumber. Okay, and then one day the narrator, just from a conversation with him, realized that this guy couldn't figure out why. That the green lumber was not lumber painted green, okay, but it was freshly cut lumber, okay. So this guy didn't know it. He didn't know something as that essential about green lumber,
and it didn't matter.
But yet, it didn't matter. So the point is not that it's not that you don't need to know things. The point is that what someone from the outside, completely outside, okay, wanted to know something about the subject, say an academic, will pick up is not can be very different from what someone from the inside will pick up.
Yeah,
you see. So that fellow who knew a lot more things probably about green lumber, but there were different things. So what you need to know in a profession isn't what people from the outside or people from the top think. It's a bottom up thing. So
yeah.
So the second point is things where survival, driven by survival, okay, do not have rationalization. A profession where you have to please the boss, of course you're going to write complicated articles and have nice argument and dress nicely and play actor.
Yeah.
But in a profession where you have to perform and you survive and do it exactly, is due 100% to your contact with success and dealing with reality, then it's very different. So this is why I said that when I ask people, and I did that tons of times, who would you rather hire as a surgeon? You have two people in the same hospital with the same rank. One fellow looks like what a Hollywood version of a surgeon would be like, gold rim, like silver rim glasses.
Yeah. It looks extra starch on the white coat. Yeah.
Exactly. And then you enter the office, a Harvard degree, that kind of stuff. Okay. And the second fellow, it looks like a butcher, all right, very, very thick fingers, speaks with a horrible New York accent, and has no diplomas on the wall. I mean, he's ashamed of where he got his degree. So, who would you pick? Well, visibly, everybody said, well, of course, the Harvard-educated surgeon looks like surgeon, but and that's pretty much what stereotypes are about. But that's not how it works. Conditional on being a successful surgeon and not looking the part, okay, it means you know your stuff. You see, so it means and that's the general idea, that where people are judged by performance, or are people judged by, or not performance as self-defined numerical performance we can always game the system, or in other words, there is a survival or there is a judgment by others. So and to finish the idea, okay, I mentioned in the book something that really crystallizes the entire concept of what we're facing. There's a friend of mine, a former trader, of course, had the bad idea of investing in restaurants for a while.
God!
Okay,
oh my God!
Okay, so he was an investor in a bunch of restaurants, and the restaurant business is a weird business.
Yeah.
So every year they have awards. Okay, the best sushi in town, the best sushi atmosphere in town, the best California roll, the best cooked steaks, the best medium, whatever. They have something. They have the awards for about everyone. And
they have it in Montreal too.
So I have all these. The awards are decided by some committee, journalists probably, and of course some other. They ask other restaurant owners, and sure, because they think that they're experts, and sure enough, most of these restaurants did not survive. Okay. To make it to the award ceremony. The restaurant would be closed.
I saw this just last night. I was at my friend Chris's house with some friends, and we decided that we wanted to order some Indian food. And so I went on my phone, and I just went in, show me the closest Indian restaurants. And it showed me, and the ones that had the highest ratings and won awards, when I called them, the number was disconnected.
Well, there you go. Okay. So here we are. In any industry or any profession, where you're judged by your peers, or you're not judged by the end users, eventually is gonna rot. So academics are not judged by customers, but they're judged like restaurant owners being judged by other restaurant owners.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're gonna go bust.
Yeah.
Academia, we prop it up artificially. Whereas restaurants that are judged by their clients, you see, you don't care about restaurant owners. And actually, I said it as a trader and as a businessman, because I'm a businessman, I'm still a trader. Okay, you don't want to be judged by others. You want others to hate you. You see, so you don't want to. So this is not how it works in the real world. Yeah. You see, so and what my other traders friends think of me is I mean, it's good. The private level, the personal level is one thing. Professionally, I want them to hate me.
Yeah.
Right. So you have so this is what people don't get. So the more modernity now is built around people judged by their peers.
Yeah.
And of course, the system is going to rot. They're going to game the system.
Yeah, it becomes like a lot of white-collar jobs these days. It's basically like a popularity contest. Like, they're not measuring your productivity at all. They ask the people that your immediate superior usually, if you've kissed his ass enough or her ass enough, then you get a great kind of review and you advance up the chain, right? But there's no real measure of your productivity.
Yeah, this is why you don't want to have anyone measure your productivity. You want reality. Survival is the only metric that you cannot gain. See, so add to that now virtue signaling, okay? And I have that chapter about the merchandising of virtue.
Yeah. Add
to that the appearance of virtue. And of course, people are going to gain virtue. You see, to me, the only virtue you cannot fake is risk-taking. See, so because it's a virtue, it's the one we need in society. As I told you, the Arabs put a huge amount of stress on economic risk-taking.
Mm-hmm.
It's not honorable to make money without risk-taking, and in business, for starting a business, this is why you can't really be retired earning money on your bonds. It's unethical. And actually, even more illegal. So, but the risk takers are the ones we need, and risk taking today is becoming more and more something that is frowned upon. And but by that class of what I call intellectually idiots.
Okay. But at the same time, I mean, you talk about this, and this is something that Aristotle's obsessed with as well. But the difference between courage and recklessness. So, I mean, one of the last lines in the
Yes.
book, which I really like, is you say, you can embrace risk with and be at the same time sort of very much averse to ruin, right? Like you have to,
Yes. Yeah. Of course.
and
Yeah. This is
that's a subtle distinction that people often just like smush them together, right? And they
yeah.
call
So
recklessness courage and risk taking.
yeah. So what you need to realize is that risk taking for the sake of risk taking is foolish. Okay, so that it doesn't meet the criterion of prudence. But risk taking for the sake of others actually reduce anything that increases the survival of a layer higher than yours. Okay, increases the chances of survival or increases life expectancy is effectively a reduction of risk is prudence. So risk taking and prudence are not opposite.
No. Yeah.
And the ancients got it, but let me phrase it in modern terms. If you risk your life, and I'm sure now you have an extra 105 years to go, you say. Okay, to save no, yeah, because I know that was modern
Yeah.
medicine and your healthy habits, Okay, so say, or okay, let's be more realistic and say another 70 years to go. Okay, so let's say that you're gambling 70 years, you're risking your life to save the life of a lot of children younger than you.
Yeah.
Okay, what are you doing? You are increasing the life expectancy of others. So, or you're preventing, you're removing a risk that reduces the life expectancy of others. So this is when we look at layers, when individually you study, um, people, individually, they it looks like, hey, he took risk, so that's his payoff. That's not how it works. You got to look at the collective. You got to look at the dynamics of complex systems, just like we started the conversation. Look at body parts. So, anyone who risks something to protect others or is effectively um, doing an action of prudence. But if you're taking and also if you're taking risk yourself and not subjecting others to risk, you're doing something honorable.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, it's dishonorable when when you transfer your risk to others. And I mean, the ancient didn't look at risk transfer. They or not directly, indirectly. Of course, you see it in laws. I went through the various maritime laws of how people share risk, but also in society, the highest ranking person is the one who takes the most risk for the sake of others. So he's not taking a risk for the sake of himself or herself.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where you put economic risk taking. Is our hero should be not NGOs trying to impose some kind of trick on some African country that may result in making Monsanto richer um, and may mess up the place. No, what we need is people to take risks, start a corporation, start a business,
Yeah.
and take risk for the sake of others. We need you to take risks. That's what we don't have. Corporations started by someone who took a lot of risk, and sure enough, they have the actors who replace that person who are rent seeking, playing some game and they'll survive a few years, a few decades maybe, and then the corporation will be absorbed by something else, and you start from scratch.
Yeah.
But so we have very few risk takers and a lot of actors everywhere, practically every field. And these people were worshipped in ancient days. Today they're not.
Yeah. No, it's true. And even just to go back to what you said earlier about the NGOs and everything, like I'll never forget the Robert Warren, who's the priest that married Annalisa and I. He's a good friend of mine, Anglican priest, one of the real mensch, like a really great guy. He was for a while running the largest homeless shelter in Montreal. A big thing called the sort of what is it called, the Molson. The Old Brewery Mission. And anyway, and at one point they got a big donation which was translating into them being able to open up, I don't know, maybe 60 more beds or something like that in the shelter. And of course, all these journalists went to go and interview him, and they put a microphone in his face, and they're like, "Oh, Reverend Warren, what do you think about getting this?" Like, as if like he should be celebrating. And he just looked with the most angry look, and he said, "This is a tragedy. Like, you want me to be happy about this? I'm really sad that we need these beds. I want to have a program for how we shut this place down. Like, I don't want this to be around." He goes, "I don't think this should exist. This is a tragedy." And so his whole he had a completely different philosophy, which really, I hope he doesn't think he's in France now, so I don't think.
No, that's an honorable approach.
He got into so much conflict with people in the organization because his whole philosophy was, how do we put this place out of business?
Exactly. That's Maimonides,
yeah.
Who, of course, all the big people of the history of thought who have survived, not your local academic, have some kind of second order thinking.
Yeah.
Okay, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Okay. So there are a few more things linked to the point. There's signaling. You see, if so the idea of skin in the game is, I don't really care what you think. I care what you do. What you think is your private business. It's not actually the business of science.
Yeah.
So all these ideas of rationality promoted by a class of people called the New Atheist, they're in conflict with the very formal definition we have of rationality, because what goes in your head, okay, is a process that is not necessarily directly linked to your actions.
Yeah.
Okay, just like
often it's a post hoc rationalization. Often.
Exactly. Yes. It's some kind of so you have to look at the results of actions, and actions are something that science can discuss, because we can measure them, we can quantify them, we can count them, we can do things. Okay, so and also because there's a translation mechanism between what you think and what you do that's not one-to-one. Anyway, so so when you start thinking of what I care about is the rationality of action, the rationality of things, not the wrapping around of the narrative around it that can be religious or whatever you want. Okay, so you start looking at that. That's what called the preferences revealed. Okay.
Yeah.
So, for example, it's not rational. I don't think it makes sense to ask you, "Hey, did you like this restaurant? How many stars you put in?" What counts for me is how many dollars you spent.
How many times do you go there, right?
Exactly. How many dollars you spent there? Even better. Okay. So the idea of
I love the aphorism of the Bed of Procrustes, where you say, like, the way you show that you like a book is by rereading it numerous times. The way you show that you like a person is by hanging out with them. It's not what you say about it, right? It's like
exactly. So it's a cheap talk. So my idea is to go against cheap talk, and we have talkers, and they dominate. The problem is, like right now today, I have another fight with those classicists. Is they want to be intermediaries, the cheap talkers between me and Seneca, or between me and whatever hero.
Yeah, I remember that was your problem with Martha Nussbaum. Originally, I remember you said that.
With all of it, I want them out of the way. I want to directly read the text and get the message from them. I don't need intermediaries. I don't want a broker. Okay,
same here.
The point that we translated, but people get that signaling right. So and it hit me just looking at the idea that people aren't impressed with talk and images, that people respect actual risk taking. That when you go to the circus, you notice that acrobats are taking risks. They're impressing you because they're taking a bunch of risks, and they don't have a parachute. There's no safety net. Okay.
Yeah.
The fire regulation, or whatever, the fire marshal or some other marshal didn't come in and mandate. So you realize that that's otherwise you wouldn't be impressed with the show.
Yeah.
So I realized that life without risk taking is sort of would be like a video game. You see. So and then it got me into Christology. I couldn't understand why we have that Trinity, and I grew up in in a place where there were a lot of other monotheistic religions, or not a lot of other
Yeah.
religions. And then the whole thing is, why do you guys Christians have the Trinity? And I couldn't explain the Trinity. Okay, maybe it's some pagan, we wanted to recycle some ancient pagan thing. No, that was not it.
That's the cheap
The thing
Joseph
kept
Campbell
coming back.
explanation. Yeah.
Yeah, but no. So the Trinity, why the Christ? Because they want to solve the problem that they could not make the Christ God. Because a God who takes no risk, what's so impressive about someone, not suffering,
Yeah.
not sacrificing and not risking? You see, we respect people like Socrates, Jesus, who died for an idea.
Yeah. Well, this is like, the Superman
idea.
comics. At first, everybody hated him because he was just invulnerable. And so they created kryptonite to make him more believable. Yeah.
Exactly. So no, because he took risks.
Exactly.
Okay, you want him to take risk. The risk-free doesn't work. You see. So here we have the God. Okay, so the Christ is not 100% God. Okay. And then you can spin how he's not God and he's not man, but he's man. Okay, he suffered like a man. Then you can understand, and also it links us to because it makes God, actually, it makes us closer to God via theosis. It's an old Orthodox theological trick, theosis, where humans can become God. So that's the whole. So the idea of risk taking is severely embedded in our instinct, and we detect it. We can detect a talker from a doer from miles away.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So what are you said that there's some sort of ideas from Skin in the Game that have you've become more aware of them as time has passed since it was published, and sort of talking to people about what are some of those ideas?
Well, I mean, there are a lot of course, sub-ideas, but the central one is one of evolution. That people have the illusion that Skin in the Game is about incentives or disincentives, when in fact it's an evolutionary argument. Without Skin in the Game, you cannot have evolution, okay? And what is obtained via evolution, which is a bottom-up process, cannot be obtained top-down.
Yeah.
Which seems trivial. So you have all these academics who are against creationism, that top-down idea, intelligent design by some higher creature, but they refuse to apply evolution to themselves. Okay, so they want to change and to society. They want to change society from the top instead of accepting evolution. So Skin in the Game, without Skin in the Game, you don't have evolution, but it's an evolutionary mechanism that it works wonderfully, because if warmongers go to war, that controls our numbers.
Yeah.
You see, so you have fewer warmongers because they're more likely to die than regular citizens.
Yeah.
You see, if citizens die and warmongers don't, just as we have now in America, we have Thomas Friedman, who didn't die in the Iraq War.
Yeah.
We have all these other neocons. They're sitting in Washington and they're surviving. So that big idea of survival, evolution, having evolution. Or evolutionary argument is into other things is something that sort of escaped people who read the book first. But let me now generalize. What I've added to Skin in the Game that was not in the inserto is two things. Actually, it was not explicitly stated in the other parts of the inserto because it came to me later. It's two things. The first one is scaling.
Yeah.
You see? Scaling was an anti-fragile, but still not as developed as now. Scaling in the sense that a large town is not like a village.
Yeah, it's not just they have totally different properties depending upon the size of something.
Exactly. From interaction. So the scaling, I introduce scaling into risk-taking by saying risk-taking for my own sake is different from risk-taking for the collective. You see.
Yeah.
And then what collective? So the statement of scaling actually went against what I call abstract universalism.
Okay.
You see, you have to organize things in a fractal way. So, in other words, the Kantian universalism cannot work because at no point in time will you ever, should you ever treat a pure stranger, with the same. You should always treat everyone nicely and everything, but you should take care of your own children okay, first before you take care of
Yeah.
strangers.
And then also you're like, I
And
care about Montrealers way more than I care about Quebecers. And I care
there
about
we go.
Quebecers
Exactly,
way more
exactly,
than I care about Canadians. And I care about
exactly.
North Americans, meaning Americans and Canadians, way more than I care about anybody else. So
Yeah, exactly. Because
that's
if you don't
normal.
do it that way, no, it's not that it's normal. Because universalists want you to move away from that, and you can show how destructive things get when you get into universalism.
Yeah.
In other words, if you open your door on Thanksgiving to a few strangers, okay, that's nice. It will enhance the experience for everyone. But if you have an open door and then throw your children out, okay, because you have random selection, and then you have to pick from the globe 8 people,
Yeah.
right? Then you're gonna it becomes a mess. Plus, there are other aspects that are very technical to show you can't not be universalist because you don't know where to stop.
Yeah.
At some point, then you have to treat your the cockroach in your house at par with your children. That's accepting. That's pure. If you take the idea to its logical absurdity,
Yeah.
all right. So that's universal. It doesn't work. That's so the first one says
Yeah.
scaling.
By the way, the scaling
second,
part
yes,
of your book, I was listening to your
yeah.
book on an audiobook and I was walking through a big nature park in Montreal. And just when I read that part, I noticed something that even though the park is inside the city, because there's less people, there's less density inside the park, when you pass a human on another person on the path, you say bonjour, like you say like hello,
Oh
and you
yeah,
look
there you
each
go.
other in the
There you
eye.
go.
Whereas the very same person, 20 minutes later on the crowded street, you would not look at them. That's
You
scaling.
got
That's
scaling.
scaling.
You got scaling.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
got scaling and you got
Yeah.
concreteness. Okay, so that's the first point,
Okay.
scaling. All right, and then of course a lot of things that come with scaling. A genius, the lady, the only one who got that
Jane
medal,
Jacobs.
Swedish. No.
Oh, who?
Eleanor. Uh, Eleanor something, Ostrom, or who discovered that fishermen, for example, they have, they don't overfish when the community is small, but when the community is large, then you have a vested interest in overfishing
Wow. That's
because
amazing.
you preserve the common when it's small, and they do it naturally. And she's shown zillions of situations
That
where
is
people
fascinating.
act differently based on size of the pastoral land and stuff like that. It's a scaling is there. Okay, so second point is what I call dynamics versus static analysis. Okay, so, and that's for risk. So, for example, there's a path dependence when you look at things dynamically. The central chapter in my book, I thought, was something called the risk taking, the logic of risk taking. That what you have when you introduce filters of survival, then your attitude towards some situations and risk change completely. Like if you have an absorbent barrier, or in other words, a possibility of ruin, it means no survival, then payoffs can no longer be analyzed as a cost-benefit analysis.
Mm-hmm.
See, so for example, if they told you that 5 doctors out of 6 tell you that Russian roulette is good for you, okay, you still cannot, because if you play Russian roulette, you eventually will be dead
Yeah.
regardless of what the payoff is. Okay, so and there are situations like that, and of course there are situations where there's no ruin, so you can gamble without ruin. That's dynamics, and it so happened that as I was writing the book, things that every single practitioner knows don't just avoid ruin. Like Goldman Sachs is 159 years old. Why? Because they have a rule. We don't want small tail risk. We want zero tail risk. In other words, risk of ruin, zero,
Wow.
not small. Because they said, okay, we're in that business, and if we take small risk, that's small risk. We end up, we end up bust
Yeah.
eventually. So the 159 years old firm, okay, and pretty much ingrained in every trader. All right, take all the risk you want, but avoid ruin. And that's not in the literature in the behavioral finance literature, and it's not in the common literature because they're missing that dimension. Like, for example, you take a lot of strategies taken statically, make them dynamic, and then you realize the profile and the decision making is different. So a lot of stuff that the nudge people who want to sort of like force you into some kind of, not nudge you, manipulate you to take some thing, stances that they deem rational, effectively are seeing things in reverse. They're making you irrational.
Yeah.
Like, for example, a very simple concept. Take paranoia. They think paranoia is irrational because it goes statically, you see. But we've survived 300 million years, okay, thanks to paranoia. So without paranoia...
Oh, it's not even just us, Nassim. I mean, paranoia is built right into, and this is, your book is right on this. Like, it's built right into nature and into all sorts of animals. Like, take for instance, in North America, there's about, I'm sort of a wannabe herpetologist to some extent, but like, there are like there are dozens of snakes in North America that look very, very much like a rattlesnake. They have the same coloration. They'll even rattle their tail, but they're completely non-venomous, right? And the reason why those snakes have evolved that way is because in nature, most animals, if they see something that looks like a rattlesnake, they're not going to take the chance because they risk ruin, right? If they get bit by it.
Exactly.
And so they're paranoid, and they will like avoid any snake that looks like a rattlesnake, even though, maybe they have seen other, animals eating them, they'll avoid all of them because it's not worth it, right? And that's a logic that's right into all sorts of living systems around us.
So overestimating risks locally means just having the right assessment long term. Because if you take the risk many times over across generations, then you end up, unless you. So a lot of these people who think that we are irrational because we overestimate some risks don't get the repetition part, the dynamics part, which is trivial. Okay. And a bunch of people have shown recently that effectively, a bunch of physicists, that all these economic models, not taking into account these, what would they call ergodicity, are completely flawed, but academics keep using them because they have no skin in the game. They don't know it. They don't have the right intuition. When you have skin in the game, you know that survival is what comes first. Like I was told when I started trading, I was told, take all the risk you want, just make sure you're in tomorrow. Okay, make sure you don't. So that's it. So they were heuristic. So another application to this dynamics versus static is that when you look at inequality, the IYI, again, intellectually at idiots, for example, they are the most unequal. Why? Because think about it, that class of civil servants coming out of good French school that produces economists who complain about inequality, these people will never ever be poor in their lives. Okay, so you have to look at dynamic inequality. You see, so the businessman who's very rich, my neighbor here, for example, he could be poor tomorrow, and I've seen enough people lose their fortune. You see, but these people are locked into a low variance lifetime situation. So that is, sorry, can we stop one second?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah,
hello.
So you're saying, the intellectual yet idiots, they don't calculate the risk correctly, and you were saying about the
go ahead.
The sort of the French civil service, so they're not going to have any risks, and so the intellectual yet idiots, they don't properly calculate risk. That's what you're.
No, it's what I'm saying is that they given that they don't take risks, they'll always be in that class, say the top 10%. Or the top 3%. So what happened is that our problem is that analyzing things in a static way give you inequality that may not prevail if you look at it dynamically. I'll give you a simple example. 60% of Americans will spend at least 1 year in the top 10%.
Yeah, I've seen these numbers.
And 10% of Americans in the top 1%. But it also tells you that people in the top 1% are not going to stay in the top 1%. They're not going to be the same 1% later.
Yeah.
You see, the way to look at it is to compare the 1% across time. That's dynamics. Not look statically of how many people are on the top, whatever. Okay, how much wealth is coming from the top 1%, which is completely different analysis. This is what I call the Markov chain. approach, and they don't do it. It just doesn't hit them. So this is where, if you look at dynamically, the civil servants stay in the same wealth class, whereas the rest of us, okay, have ups and downs. I have friends who've been unemployed for 10 years, okay? But of course, they counted as part of the inequality before, but you got to take a lifetime inequality. Another way to view it is take the Forbes. They took the Forbes 500 1982 in 2012 and looked at who was still there, which families were still there. A pitifully small number, something like 10%. Okay, in Europe, you still have in Florence the same families. Okay, 550 years later. Okay.
Well, it's funny because that's Seneca and Epictetus, a number of them, but those two especially, they talk about this with reference to age and power as well. Like they say, like, if you meet a great man, you shouldn't be intimidated. You should realize you're seeing this person at the height of their powers, but you could, if you had seen this person when they were a small boy, or if you saw them when they were an old man, you would have a different, conception. So you're seeing somebody in a particular point in time, right? So you shouldn't be like, so somebody may be very rich now, or they may be downtrodden now, but things can change. But yeah.
So what you want a society. So my rule, this is why I like increasingly that Islamic rule about you cannot invest your money without taking risk. Okay. And why do I like it? Because it forces you to continuously take risk. So what I want is inequality in risk. You're in the top 1%, top 0%, top billionaire. You need to keep taking risks.
Yeah.
We don't want to tax you. We just want to force you to take risks. You see? So people don't realize that how do you reduce inequality, okay, is by having a movement of people towards the top, okay? And how do you have movement of people towards the top? By having the top move out. And what you have in Europe is the following. When a firm becomes successful in Europe, they take control of the government, as they do in France, get staffed with civil servants, Dassault, all these companies. And eventually, you see, it's sort of part of the government, so it stays up at the top.
Yeah.
Whereas in America, people have tried that with that crony capitalism that we had, particularly under Obama. But in America, what you want to make sure is that the company that gets to the top is weakened. As the antitrust people weakened Microsoft years ago when America was still America. You see, so not like play the game for Google and Facebook. So the whole idea of stability at the top, okay, is what you got to focus on. You got to make sure nobody stays at the top and remains powerful at the top. And this we're achieving with the huge turnover we have in the S&P 500. That to me is the metric I told you in the beginning, that established companies aren't so established anymore.
Yeah.
Okay. That's the best news we can have.
Yeah. No, that makes...
As the French would say in Montreal, place aux autres.
Well, I want to circle back to something you just mentioned because it's kind of blowing my mind a little bit. This study about the fishermen and how they don't overfish when they're a certain size. Because usually the main argument for, the tragedy of the commons argument, they say that the reason why we need government regulation is because without some kind of regulation, you're going to have people overfishing. You're going to have people sort of just trashing the commons. And if what she's saying is a robust result that applies to many other domains, then this would be a libertarian response to the problem of the commons.
Definitely.
That basically all you need to do is scale things right, and they'll take care of themselves.
Exactly.
That is a very great. That's an amazing finding.
Yeah, I mean, if you call it, you don't have to call it libertarian. You can call it localist.
Yeah.
You see, nobody's really libertarian because, like, I may be libertarian at the federal level, but not at the local level. You see, it's at what unit you want the control to be. I mean, I know people in New York City who live in a co-op, and the co-op rules don't allow them to use the elevator if they're carrying a grocery bag, for example. Or some actually co-op rules in the 80s banned people from wearing jeans. Yeah, it's fine, but that's what you got into. You see, that you move out if you don't like it. You move out. You go elsewhere. So the libertarian, I'm more of a localist.
Yeah.
I'm not quite a libertarian. I'm a localist. Okay, and you could be like Italians. In fact, have communes like in Bologna
Yeah.
that are very wealthy. But they are sort of separatist in a way, although it's socialist, because they don't want to share their wealth with
Yeah.
Sicily. Okay, and or vice versa. That's it. But they're very wealthy and they're communists. Okay, and they have a huge pension fund. And their idea is okay. At this scale, this is how we want to share the pension fund receipts. We don't want to give it to the government. The central government will allocate it to other provinces and their own salaries. So localism solves a lot of problems. Uh, Everybody gives lip service to localism, but nobody goes all the way to accept uh, its conclusions. The localism saves us from something complicated called the minority rule. I mean, I mentioned it earlier, but without going too much depth. Because you may have a strong minority take over a community, but not another.
Yeah.
You see, so you'd have some diversity. People give lip service to diversity. You don't want diversity. You want diversity across different systems. You see, and these you achieve with
Yeah.
localism. So you may have a communist mayor here and a libertarian mayor next door, and would be compete, and those
People can vote with
two
their
towns would be
feet. Yeah.
competing.
Yeah.
Exactly. You can switch. You can do whatever you want, or you can vote
Yeah.
within. Even you don't even have to vote by leaving. But so Switzerland is a wonderful, case study of localism that managed through the last couple of 220 years to do very very well. You see,
Yeah.
in spite of all the problems in Europe, or thanks to all the problems in Europe. So localism is quite important because I observed in Lebanon how people, when they're in their own neighborhood, they become tolerant of the others.
Yeah.
Like, for example, I live not far from Tripoli, and Tripoli was taken over by
Yeah.
Salafis, which is very interesting. But so long as they have their own neighborhood, and they're in their neighborhood, they love us Christians, and we love them so long as we can go. We shop there, and we kiss one another. But it's wonderful. They don't feel threatened. We don't feel threatened. You see, and somehow the Lebanese government wanted all this integration. You see, of people created social tension when organically, when the system, because of civil war, people stayed in the neighborhood. Now, of course, if you say, "Oh, in the name of diversity, I want to put a few Christians in the Salafi neighborhood," you're going to make them
Yeah.
intolerant. But now they're very tolerant. Good neighbors, all right. People may be very poor roommates, but excellent,
Yeah.
neighbors. So that's how it works. So that's localism. So we have to figure out how things work locally, not say I'm left, I'm right, I'm something. And then the other thing, the ethics of the system. My whole idea in Skin the Game started, and of course it took me in a different direction. It started with the notion that I don't want anybody to exercise power over individuals. Not Monsanto, not the government, not the civil servants, stuff like that. And so sort of everybody agrees. It's just the degree of who can deliver may vary across political,
Mm-hmm.
opinions. Like, for example, everybody knows that we need, justice. Everybody accepts that we need justice. And some people think that the state can deliver justice, where libertarian would tell you, no, the state is not an abstract entity; it's a collection of civil servants. You see, and so this is where you solve that with localism.
Yeah.
You see, if you like the state, that's fine. You have it here, that romantic thing. Plus, people don't realize the success of countries that are identical in racial or whatever ethnic or religious composition. You see, that are neighboring one another. Okay, is mind-boggling. I mean, compare
Mm-hmm.
Dubai, the mentality of Dubai to Saudi Arabia. They're the same people.
Are they really?
Okay, but Dubai is what is a tiny town, and Saudi Arabia is whatever huge. You see, so of course there's other variations, but and then when you compare Singapore to
Yeah.
China,
Yeah. I love
okay, now of
Singapore, by
course
the
there are
way. I
circumstances. There
yeah.
are circumstances that make it that may make Singapore having to face more economic difficulties, hence get stronger. But still, I mean, this whole concept of scale. We compare political system, not scale.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, what do you think about people who say? I mean, this is everybody. Newspapers and journalists are saying this all the time that that sort of fascism and authoritarianism are on the rise. In all these different in Russia and all these
Well,
different
okay,
places. I mean, what do you make of that?
okay, do yourself. Okay, let me tell you, I did myself a favor in 1985 when someone told me don't read the papers because I said what? He said, think about it a little. I said what? He said, who's writing these articles? I said, journalist. He said, why are you taking advice from a journalist? Okay. And then of course I didn't realize in finance it was central because they, again, for the green lumber fallacy, they focus on the wrong things and then they drive you into a lot of mistakes, you see. So they think that this is important, that is important, and you realize what happens with newspapers. So, but I discovered that in '85, and of course I don't read papers, but I'm glad there's online there's this social media thing. But okay, so when you continue, of course you're going to get things wrong across the spectrum because one, journalists are fragile; they're prone to monoculture.
Yeah,
And of course it's so fragile. If I call you fascist, now suddenly he's right wing, and then you lose initially. Of course, after a while they're going to, and it's going to lose its you know
yeah.
power.
Well, words like
But
that, I always say they're
the
like plastic bags. If you put too much shit in it, they just break and then they're useless. If everybody's a
exactly. So
racist,
that's
nobody is. If everybody's a fascist, nobody
exactly.
is. I mean, like, yeah,
Exactly, but the fascism exists vastly more among them, the people who accuse others of fascism. So there's something I call bigoteering. Bigoteering, which is a province of the fraudster, is using, say, the idea, accusing someone of sexism, of racism, when it's unjustified, uh, to gain advantage over the person in a debate or something
yeah,
else, in a dispute. And bigoteering is very dangerous because I can bigoteer anyone. You see, anyone can
yeah.
bigoteer anyone. Someone who and also they start making the racial classification of who can bigoteer the most. So the whole idea. So, but okay, going back to the press. So that media thing seems to be totally ineffective. Donald Trump got elected. Okay, I had skin in the game reviewed by exactly zero media in the United States initially, okay, and it opened 2 on the bestseller list. So explain to me, why do I need the media, okay, and who takes them seriously?
Yeah.
And so I have, so I'm discovering more. I mean, I'm thinking about the media. Okay, they gave Donald Trump between 0 and 3% chances of winning, or say 5%. They gave, and conditionally on Trump winning, they thought that the world would collapse, the market would collapse. It didn't. So you're entitled to ignore the media. And then when someone is talking about, I remember talking about the rise, someone like Cass Sunstein, all that establishment of people that seem to have a mental disease when it comes to Trump. They're talking about the rise of authoritarianism. Explain to me how you can have fascism when you can write a book like that. Explain to where are the journalists that were rounded up by
Yeah.
Trump, okay, and put in a cave somewhere? Where are they? All right,
Well, you
where
look what
are the
happens to
journalists who
journalists
have been?
in Putin's Russia, and that's what fascism actually looks like, right?
But even then, with Putin's Russia, because I was in Russia and I went explicitly to talk about how defective the Russian concentration model was for me. Concentration of
Mm-hmm.
power, of economic power. It's very strange. I went on Russia Today and I went in and I told them, can I say anything I want? They said, you can say whatever you want. I told them, so how do they say, but what if they say, what people seem to not like is some direct personal attack on someone. All right, everything else you can. So I went in. I told them, since the Tsar, your problem in Russia is neither communism nor your problem is scale.
Yeah.
Okay, and I told them, you'll never go anywhere if you have 50 people. It's like the Russian army. You have 50 generals for
Yeah.
every soldier. Okay, it doesn't work that way. You have to invert the pyramid, And I said that you never go, so it's fine. I thought that after I was going to get deported, killed, murdered, or something like that the same day. All right. So that's what I thought. So I went to my hotel, everything, and then I got a call. People like the idea. Can you come back and elaborate
No
more?
way. Oh
I swear.
that's
Okay.
amazing.
So this is Russia. I mean, so I was wondering, what is it? Why is it that there's things I can't say in the New York Times that I can say on Russia Today or on Russian media about Russia?
That's amazing.
Okay, I mean, this is where, I mean, so there may be some constraint to the freedom of speech, but doesn't look like the constraints on the freedom of speech I got in the United States. When you when you have a lot of the fake news effect is real. Okay, the way things are interpreted is real, and I've seen it with CNN, I've seen it with the media, I've seen it. So it's very simple. Ignore the media and wait till it reveals itself. Plus, the media is not Lindy. Lindy means has survived the test of time. The media, the way it is, it started in 1960s to this one-sided monopoly over your thought, because the family watching television without interaction. And they didn't realize that the organic media doesn't work that way. And at no point in time before were people recipients of information without being transmitters of the same information, with plus or minus some deformation. Okay, so the organic world will be Twitter, Facebook, whatever next generation thing.
Well, social media has already done that a lot. I mean, like it's become much more, like you say, the storytelling between friends. So I care about Lebanon because I care about you, right? I care about France because they speak French and I have a cultural connection to them and I have friends there. So it's much more kind of, rather than somebody deciding what I should care about today. Right?
Exactly.
I find out stories that are somehow connected to my friend circles and family circles, right?
Yeah, that's much more organic. And also within that, you cannot be as people without someone interrupting and delivering you fact. And once in a while, you start tagging people about how reliable they are.
Absolutely.
And I've noticed on social media, some people are very reliable, some others are not. So either I mute them or block them or something because they're chronically unreliable one way or another. Then it's like in the markets. In the markets, the price will be not determined by the loudest information, but by the most reliable one. And so you have genesis of something what I call is something that is what I call a dual to the information, which is its effect on prices, and that dual to the information is so much cleaner than the information sources themselves. And this is sort of what Hayek got. Hayek got a lot of things right.
Yeah. Well, they have this wonderful expression in the American South when I was living there, and I have family down there, but they say, like, people develop a hearing for you, right? And so, like, if you recommend a book and I read the book and it sucks, I'm going to make a mental note. Don't accept book recommendations from this person in the future. If you recommend a restaurant and it sucks, but if all of your restaurant recommendations have been good, then if you recommend a place, I'm going to go there, because
that's exactly how I'm using social media. And this is also how I'm trying to position myself on social media. If I make a mistake, to retract very quickly.
No, I've seen you do that many times, but to
retract, because you value the integrity of information more than whatever you're trying to propose.
But I find, just to sort of circle back to what you said about fake news, what I find is a bigger problem than fake news at the moment is sort of a version of confirmation bias, where you have sort of websites or blogs or news, radio shows, TV shows, newspapers, where they basically have this unwritten principle: we will publish any story that says one of these three things, right? And so
it's sort of like the publication by that, but that's people detect that because
so the stories are true, but it's very misleading because they're not telling you about the 20 stories that contradicted that story or
Yeah, but people after a while figured it out.
yeah
Okay, so you go to the news because you want someone to tell you about things about Trump today. Okay, and well, that's one way. Or you want to go to the news because you want to invest
yeah
tomorrow. You see, and so you figure out what's good for therapy and what's good for decision making. So you can figure out. But some people don't figure it out and they go bust and they don't count. So it's not numerical because a minority rule things are not
yeah
numerical. Let me mention another thing about the news. Another way is Ron Paul, for example, who's a friend and someone I respect, is someone of a huge amount of integrity. So what the media did, alerted me to a problem is that you should never judge people by what they say. Okay, whether racist, whatever it is, or appears to be, or staffers say, or a mistake. You should look at how they act or have acted in
yeah
the past. Ron Paul voted against every single war. And here we have these war criminals, okay, because to me, someone who voted in favor of war in Iraq or in favor of the regime change in Libya or Syria is effectively in the same class as war criminal
hmm
if you influence that without taking risk yourselves. Uh, Calling him bigotteering against him, when in fact he has a cleaner record than they do. So this is what is central, is that and I called it in Skin the Game the principle of
yeah
charity. Never judge people on what they say. Focus on what they
yeah
meant. To get what they mean, you require some homework. This is their message, and this is where you go. Like for example, you can always
yeah
quote out of
if you want to
context
do the gotcha
someone saying
journalism
something.
bullshit
Exactly,
yeah
exactly. So a lot of people, but somehow people stopped playing it with me because I made an effort on social media to just propose to first of all bring names, create names for that. All right, say a charlatan by definition is someone who will focus on what you said, not what you meant. Like Sam Harris. Oh, look what he said. It's completely out of context, or he's not representing the idea. Whereas in the integrity of someone like Karl Popper, and this is why people still talk about Karl Popper. Karl Popper, he would represent, he said, more faithfully the ideas of his opponents, okay, than his own.
steelman the
If he
position
said
yeah
duty.
yeah
Exactly, and then you tear it down, and after you tear down something you represented so faithfully, it will not recover. But so and that technique, that ethics, that the ethics are time tested, and of course, if the media doesn't respect that, tell me what Trump meant, not what he said. Okay, tell me what Trump did. No, okay. Other than that, they're going to keep strengthening Trump against their own interests.
yeah I mean but some people just seem to become kind of very anti-fragile to attacks because they like I can't remember one of it was a really horrible review of the Black Swan that was in the New Republic I believe and I wrote an angry letter in response to it and like said this stuff and it was funny the editor the person who managed the stuff sent me a message back and he said I don't remember ever in my since I've had this job, I don't remember ever receiving so many like angry letters like from readers about a review, like individual. And he said, is this part of like a letter writing campaign? And I said, no, like no.
Oh, okay.
It,
And I bet you I wasn't aware of it. No, I had like something like 3,000 book reviews of The Black
yeah,
Swan. So I made it a policy to not read them because except if a friend wrote it and wants an opinion or something. But the I simply because you can't keep up with. I have
yeah,
other things to do than worry about my previous
yeah.
books.
But the reviews, I would say, the reviews of your books, the worst reviews that I've read of any of your books have been of Skin in the Game. Like the absolute worst. Like where you read it and you think, did this person even read the fucking book? Like it's just like completely
Yeah, but
wrong.
they're not. No, because you have to realize that skin in the game goes effectively against reviewers. They don't have skin in the game. They're not doers. They're just talkers. And and so of course, but they don't count. It's just I'm over this. They don't count. You see, so the my job as an author is to not get immersed with propaganda of my own, or propaganda or marketing of my own work, because this is the nightmare of every author. When I did my book, I told the publisher, listen, I'm not going to do a 14 city tour with 2 talks per city and 15 radio interviews in between, and stuff. I'm not going to do any of that. Okay, I'm just going to do 1 lecture because I'm not in that business. That's it. I'm out of that business. I'm in the business of writing books. That's it. Or doing math.
Yeah.
That's it. So
yeah, well, I have 2 questions that I want to make sure I ask you before I forget, because they're on my list, my mental list of. So one of them has to do with Jordan Peterson. I'll get to that in a minute, but the second one is with religion, right? So one of the ideas that you develop, this is actually something that's been around in your writing all the way since Fooled by Randomness, but it's much more fully developed in Skin in the Game, which is the idea that religion is ultimately about sort of fostering epistemological humility within us, right?
And okay, there are a lot of aspects of religion. We have to realize that it depends. I mean, religions, some religions are very tolerant. Pagan religions are very tolerant. Okay, what religion does and is to prevent you from thinking that you are God. Okay, so just see. So if that's sufficient to justify religion. So you know you're not God. Simplifies. The other one is, of course, to force you into some rules that you wouldn't have otherwise, and they're transmitted. It's a great way to have transmit interdicts. Okay, and of course, you may think that modern societies would replace science with science, but I'll answer what science? Something that survived. I'm a statistician. Something that survived, thousands of years is vastly more robust than something you pulled out of psychology paper, knowing that about 60% of psychology papers don't replicate, and the other 40% don't have the same effect. So I mean, I'm saying, who should I trust? I mean, explain to me what you find by science, something that has p-values that don't replicate. So this is where I say, okay, you can be skeptical. To me, so long as religion doesn't lead to harming those who bear it or harming others now, okay, because of intolerance, it's okay. So what goes into your head, what representation you have in your head is not the business of science. And this is what these atheists don't get, is that they're not scientific. They're just like, they've invented something they call science. It's scientistic to me. And that's fake. And science doesn't make these. Science is very narrow. Science tells you this, that. Doesn't make claims outside its narrowly defined domain.
Yeah. I think that's an idea that a lot of people who are into the whole new atheism thing don't understand, that because they have this idea, and it's a very Protestant idea, actually, right? I was hanging out with my friend Phil yesterday, and he's like you, Greek Orthodox, and we were talking about how, like, for him, religion is not about what you believe, it's about ritual, it's about what you do, and it fosters a kind of humility and a sense of awe, and it's not it's nothing like what Sam Harris and Christopher Hitchens and people like that say it is, right? That it's, for most people, it enlarges the world.
No, they're playing. Of course, they're playing. They're misrepresenting what the notion of belief. Epistemic beliefs are one thing. Scientific beliefs, the ones we have in science, are very different from what I call procedural beliefs or episteic beliefs. Religion would complete different, and you cannot compare the two, because these beliefs don't make epistemic claims. You see. Then another thing about I'm discovering with religion. I mean, I favor ancient pagan Mediterranean religion a lot because of tolerance. Hey, your neighbor has a god. Hey, let's trade gods. So it becomes additive. Yeah. That's very nice. And then the monotheism. So you have the smaller the number of gods you got, okay, Like ISIS has exactly one god, and the more intolerant you are, ISIS has one god, and of course, atheists
Yeah.
has zero god, so they're maximally intolerant, and they are
Yeah.
maximally intolerant.
No, it's. I mean, the ancient way of
I
the
mean,
pagan way is just fascinating because it's almost like if you were to move to a new place, you would enter the jurisdiction of a new god, right? And so you would be expected to, show proper respect to the god of that city or that lake or that. It's
exactly, yeah, yeah.
fascinating. I mean, like,
It
yeah,
is fascinating. It is because of course, I mean, there have been some problems, but my suspicion, and I think it seems to be confirmed by some historical accounts, that they were very tolerant, except against Christians, because the Christians were not
yeah.
tolerant of their gods,
That was a fascinating part
not
of the
the
book where
reverse.
you talk about how it's actually the intolerance and the sort of the marriage rules in places like Egypt that's how the Muslims uh, finally became to predominate. That it wasn't so much force or the sword, although there was some of that. It was just having these
Yeah,
like little
some minority. Yeah,
intolerance rules
exactly.
about who you can marry and who you can't, and that has long term consequences. Yeah,
No, no, no. The tolerance was not. I mean, it's open. People can marry people of another religion. It's the point is that children have to be of
yeah.
certain faith, and that makes over 10 centuries that will bring you from 5% to ninety-five
Yeah.
percent. That's it. A very simple rule like that in an environment that doesn't have that has a flat terrain. If you have mountainous, poor communication between parts of the mountain, then it'll be different.
Yeah.
And then within Islam, of course, you have the most tolerant one is Shiite
Yeah.
Islam, but vastly more tolerant than, of course, other branches. So they have a lot of branches, and Islam to me is very similar to
Yeah.
Christianity. I cannot distinguish. I cannot see a difference between a Shiite and a
Yeah.
Christian.
No, I see that in Montreal all the time. It totally fits. But anyway, so the question I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you about Jordan Peterson is my fellow Canadian
Yes.
is there's this,
Yeah.
and you talk about sort of taking risks and that being really important. And one of the things I think people love about your books so much, I know it's something I immediately loved about your books, is that you take risks as a writer. And the way that you take risks is that you really expose yourself, sort of warts and all. Like you're very, you show your vulnerabilities, you show your, but there's this one wonderful passage in Anti-Fragile where you talk about what happened to you after the success of the Black Swan. And you say you got commodified and you were doing way too many radio interviews, way too many TV interviews, and you were being kind of shipped around, and you became like a product, and it kind of burned you out, and you were sort of forgetting what you were. I could not help but think of that passage when Jordan Peterson, he was here in Montreal to give a talk very recently, and I met with him and talked. He looks tired. I mean, he looks, yeah,
It was, yes, he would, yeah. No, so you lose control of your life and your ideas, your activities via success. But I was very lucky with the Black Swan because that moment lasted 6 months. Okay, and after 6 months, I had a complete reaction. Okay, no
yeah,
interviews, nothing, practically nothing. Okay, complete withdrawal. Once in a while, two maybe. So you have 365 days a year. You say, okay, 4 days a year.
yeah,
That's it. No more. Okay, that's it. 4 days, maybe more. I mean, maybe a few lectures here and there. That's it. The rest got to be dedicated to private
yeah,
life and production. That's it. And within private life and production, I want to spend 300 out of 365 days a year in my library. Okay,
yeah,
so this, and this is why we had to delay this podcast to today. So partly, because I can't do, if I do a podcast today, it's going to take maybe 2 months before
yeah,
I can do another one. All right. So the and then I realized, yeah, it works. But I saw the other people; they get ruined
yeah,
by success. But okay, now granted, Jordan Peterson has a mission
yeah,
in life, and it can be to promote some ideas and have an impact on society. Okay, and they may come from what they
Yeah.
call engagement and stuff. Okay, maybe that's it, or it could be something else. And of course, his followers want more
Yeah.
engagement to change things. So, and this may not be done via another book, may be done via his podcasts and trips
Yeah.
and lectures and stuff. So you got to give him some flack because he's involved in a mission that is quite
Yeah.
important. Okay, although I may disagree or know nothing about his clinical psychology, but you can tell yourself that anyone who is fighting for freedom of thought or fighting for that needs to be protected
Mm-hmm.
somehow. You see, so I'm not going to go interfere with his mission of fighting for for the university to become a university. Okay, so and for some kind of intellectual diversity to be in place.
Yeah.
So,
I feel like, yeah.
so this is why and actually he may be doing a good job of that.
Mm-hmm.
See.
I just think it's sad. I kept thinking, like, I wish, Nassim would reach out to him and just, tell him, like, look, I've been down this road. Because I remember your interviews, like, during the period before you had this sort of realization and this revelation. In the interviews, you were very indulgent towards the journalists that were interviewing you. You're very sort of charming and trying very, and then there was a certain point where it just interviews, it was like active hostility.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I would. No. I thought at some point I wanted, to fight the economic
Yeah.
establishment, and Obama became president right after the Black Swan, and we had Geithner who gave the bankers the biggest bonus in their history.
Unbelievable.
So I mean,
Unbelievable.
and on the name, and so you just realize, I mean, we're living in a society where people so-called on the left are for crony capitalism, militarism, stuff like. So you realize it's easier to shill. You see, when you're labeled mistakenly left wing. Yeah. Than when you're labeled right wing. This is what the military contractors discovered. Yeah. Right? You want a journalist to shill for you? Make sure he's on the left. Okay. And of course with bankers, you want someone to shill for you. Make sure he's on the so-called left. Not, of course, there's a real left. Of course, Ralph Nader and other people. But there's what's called the pseudo left. And of course I was fine. So. Then you got frustrated, and and said, my job is not to win the last argument on the media today. My job is to write something that lasts and can survive the Lindy effect. So let me go back. But I tell you, honestly, I enjoy, for out of pleasure, my Twitter interaction between the fights, because when I go to the gym, usually, I discovered that it's very inefficient to lift weight and then come back home. So what you do is you lift weight, exhaust yourself a little bit, and then it takes you need about 30 minutes to recover properly to do another session of weightlifting. Okay, so instead of so I do 10 minutes of weightlifting, take 30-minute break. And during this 30-minute break, the best thing you can do is a Twitter fight. So, or
to
find
get your heart pumping and testosterone pumping.
No, it's just to kill time. It's kill time. It kills time. It's kill time. Or on. So I do it in airports typically. So a lot of my social media, in fact, is in these circumstances.
You're killing time to get away. One of the most memorable episodes in Skin in the Game is that interaction you had with Susan Sontag at I think it was at a radio station or can you just sort of recount that? I mean, it's amazing.
Yes.
I mean,
okay. So I was the author of a book on randomness, and Susan Sontag. It was 2001, I think, right after 2 months after September 11th. Where's this author of the book on randomness? Here he is. Great. Start talking to me, and then she saw the book. She looked on the cover. That I was she looked at the cover and realized I was a traitor, and then it's as if I had killed her mother. You're a traitor. I'm outside the capitalistic system. I said, oh, the poor woman lives in a hut. But that mid-sentence, I didn't exist like rudely, like not even goodbye. And then her assistant gave me the eye like I was a criminal, all right? So I realized, these poor people, they live in a hut or something. Till she passed away, I think a few years later, and I looked at her obituary. She was living in a $17 million mansion. Okay, there's something, or something that was sold, was on sale for 17 million. So you realize, you know what? They got me once, and they're not gonna give me a second time.
Yeah.
So we've been 11:48.
All right. Well, we should close up, I guess. But anyway, thank you so much for coming on the podcast to talk about your book. And maybe you could just, what is the next project going to be?
This is, I hate that point. The Inserto is an open project.
Okay.
Which I may close or not close. And then there's a technical Inserto, which is a very, very open project. And I'm working on that. So you don't work on body parts, you work on the whole thing.
Because I was asked in a class, I've assigned your books to many classes, and I was asked by a very, very bright student, said at the end of the semester, said, well, what do you think Taleb's next book is going to be about? And
well, I mean, it's called The Statistical Consequences of Fat Tails, Volume 1 of the Technical Inserto. And Volume 2 is about fragility and anti-fragility. And they're a collection of peer-reviewed papers. So my enemies, to give them a hard time, to make it more difficult for them, I have 12 peer-reviewed papers, right, that I'm publishing with commentary before and after explaining the papers. You see, so in in the same attitude. So the papers are polite, but my comments before and after are not polite. But but that's a technical Inserto, and it's very, very mathematical.
Yeah.
But one thing I've done that was during the post post Jordan Peterson phase, the one he's in, is I locked myself up and I did math for pleasure. And when you do 3, 4 hours, 5 hours of math every day for 7 or 8 years, then you end up sort of like enjoying the medium. You see. So I like to write, and it's much more pleasurable to write a math book, because sort of like painting. You see, you're seeing like something in front of you. I love that. And also, to skin the game is you, as an artisan, you have the whole product. So I'm typesetting, I'm doing it, I'm going to even publish myself. The whole thing, I'm going to take the whole procedure.
I saw that. You inspired me to learn that stuff too, the software and how you can actually...
the latex.
It gives you such a feeling of almost being like a shoemaker, rather than just like assembling it together with parts that you get from Taiwan or something. It's like you actually construct the sole and you can make the laces yourself, and it's so powerful.
Exactly, everything yourself, A to Z. And let me tell you the beauty of it. Latex is actually the best way, because it's open source. It's a collection of people. It's the best way you can organize a text.
Yeah.
And it's the most aesthetic one, and because you can do the Bible in latex, you can, just like they did it in the old days, it allows you to do that. And you cannot find, this is a situation of not only you're doing the whole thing yourself, you cannot find people in publishing houses who know how to properly work latex.
That's amazing. It's like the Unix of publishing or something.
Exactly. I wanted to have skin in the game in latex, okay? And people can't handle it. They cannot handle latex. Which is why I may start my own publishing house, but please don't tell anyone. Except, of course,
everybody just heard it. All right. Well, thank you very much. I hope you have a wonderful weekend.
Very honored. Thanks, my friend. And I'm glad we're doing it now.
It was perfect.
Okay?
All right. Take care.
Thanks a million.
Bye.
Thanks, my friend. Thanks. Bye now.